Discerning Hearts provides content dedicated to those on the spiritual journey. To continue production of these videos, prayers, and more, go to discerninghearts.com and click the donate link found there or inside the free Discerning Hearts app to make your donation. Thanks, and God bless.
DiscerningHearts.com presents Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors. I'm your host, Kris McGregor, and I am delighted to be joined once again by Joe Paprocki, who has served as National Consultant for Faith Formation at Loyola Press. Joe, who has over 40 years of experience in pastoral ministry, has authored over 20 books on catechesis and pastoral ministry, and has presented in over 150 dioceses in North America. He received his Master's of Pastoral Studies from the Institute of Pastoral Studies at Loyola University of Chicago, and has his Doctor of Ministry from the University of St. Mary of the Lake, located at Mundelein Seminary. With Joe Paprocki, we go inside the pages of 8 Steps to Energize Your Faith, published by Loyola Press. Joe, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kris. It's great to be here with you.
I loved 8 Steps to Energize Your Faith. When I picked it up and I started reading it, I went, oh my gosh, I'm just getting energized holding your book. I just think this is something that's important for people to touch base on. So thank you so much for writing it.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate that. And, I think the timing on this was good, though we're still coming out of the pandemic experience that sapped a lot of energy out of us. And we have all kind of challenges in our society and our country and our world that sap a lot of energy out of us. And sometimes I think we just need a shot in the arm and, just a reminder that God is near to us and is eager to share his life with us, that divine energy that I talk about in the book. And so we just have to find more ways to tap into that.
You had me at George Bailey and Elijah. I've come to a whole new appreciation in the last few months about the prophet Elijah, having gone to the Holy Land and kind of experienced it through his footsteps. Yeah. But then when I saw your book and then you connected him to George Bailey and to us, to our own experience, then I thought, wow, no, this is important. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, the Elijah story of him, falling asleep under the broom tree. I mean, we teach that to kids, and it's kind of this cute story that he's taking a nap and so on. It's a heavy story. I mean, he lays down under that tree, and he wishes that he will never wake up again. I mean, these are deep, despairing thoughts, suicidal thoughts. He wishes not to live anymore. And George Bailey, of course, has the same experience where he decides that, he's worth more dead than alive. That's pretty serious stuff. Now, not all of us are, considering such a desperate move, but, all of us get tired of life sometimes. And sometimes we just are looking for that energy to really want to live again, like George Bailey says when he's coming out of his time with Clarence. I want to live again. I want to live again. I think coming out of the pandemic and out of so many other challenges that we face, our souls, our spirits are just sort of crying out, I want to live again. I want to live again. And so, yeah, those seemed like a couple of good examples to bring in. And I was intrigued, too, how both of them, it's by the intervention of an angel. Mm-hmm. We know Clarence for George Bailey. We don't know the name of the angel that intervened for Elijah. But it means divine intervention, that God comes to our assistance during times like that. And so I just thought, I think anytime we're dealing with despair, it's a reminder that we are dealing with a spiritual issue and God is ready to intervene.
What I find fascinating about Elijah is the fact that he was successful. He had done what he was supposed to do. Everything was supposed to work out. Now he's under attack. And someone's out to get him, and it's not working out the way that it should have worked out. And how often is that present in our own life experience where we are doing everything we're supposed to do, and it seems like there should be success, and yet it just turns on us. And then we wonder, wow, where are you, God? What's happened?
Yeah, sometimes it does feel like, every good deed turns into some kind of punishment for us. that we're doing everything we're supposed to do, but somehow things still turn against us, or things don't turn out, or we're getting no appreciation. And, so that it can be a very frustrating thing. And, very often doing the right thing is not popular or affirming. And so we can, really, really feel like, we are being punished for doing well, for doing good deeds, the way Elijah felt. So, yeah, this is not a matter of failure. People can feel despair in the midst of what looks like success. I mean, how often do we comment about people who, have done something drastic, such as, taking their own life, a celebrity, for example. And we're like, gosh, all that money and all that fame, that's no guarantee. And so Elijah doing God's will, there's no guarantee that your life is going to become problem-free and cure-free. So, and I think it's a great story for us to ruminate on and to recognize how this happens in people's lives.
I love 8 Steps to Energize Your Faith, because you do help us to have that conversion experience, or help us along in that. And of course, we know that conversion is an action word. It's not a static. And no matter where you are in your faith life, we're called to constantly be turning even more towards Christ, to God. And that can be hard. Sometimes we get stuck, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I have been stuck many times in my spiritual journey. I think what I wanted to do with this book was I wanted to really speak to those people who are saying, I'm spiritual but not religious. I have a special place in my heart for people like that, because while I love my religion, being a Catholic, I love my tradition, I can understand how people are fed up with certain aspects of religion, and yet they're searching, and they say they're spiritual, and I want to help them find the spiritual in everyday living without being overly churchy on them. So I'm not embarrassed of my, religious background and my practices as a Catholic. I'm not trying to hide them, but I really tried to get outside of the church building, so to speak, to offer practices that are everyday things that someone who is thinking, well, I'm not ready to be, darkening the doorways of a church right now, but is God still available to me? And, I come from an Ignatian background. I work for Loyola Press. And so we believe, as St. Ignatius taught, that we can find God in all things. And so I think maybe that's a first step back for some folks who are spiritual but not religious, is helping them recognize the spiritual, and then, hopefully at some point being able to invite them to see, well, how can a practice of religion strengthen that? But I think that, God certainly can be found in church, but God created all of this creation and can be found in every aspect, every nook and cranny of creation. So, yeah, practical ideas that people can find in everyday living.
I think that's key. The part of us, especially those who do have a relationship with Christ and find its fullest expression for us in the Catholic faith, the rubber hits the road when we have to trust that He will, in that other person's heart and soul, work His grace and work with that person where they're at. Our job is to love them in that moment. Those are the 2 great commandments, right, Joe? I mean, exactly. It's love God and love your neighbor. So in loving them and helping them with your good example, your own faith life, it will move them, hopefully, towards Him into that fuller experience, that fuller communion.
Yeah, precisely. I think I would never look down my nose at someone who is saying, okay, I'm spiritual but not religious. It's easy to just say, oh, that's ridiculous. And so it's like, well, this is where a lot of people are at, so let's take them where they're at. Again, St. Ignatius said that when You're trying to persuade someone to a way of thinking that you should enter through their door and then try to lead them to what he calls your door or God's door. And so it's taking people where they're at. And so if this is where people are at right now, then how do we meet them there? And how do we help them to recognize that what we celebrate in our religious tradition is the fact that God is with us all the time. We sacramentalize that. We, as a way of our worshiping, of making it more concrete for us. But we don't have a monopoly on God's presence. God is present in and throughout all of creation and all of our experiences. So yeah, it's taking people where they're at and loving them, as you said, Kris, and showing them perhaps a way of looking at things a little differently than they have before.
It's difficult to help others until you can't give what you don't have. It's difficult to help others until we can kind of, as you call it, energize our own faith. I mean, it should be the best that we can be in that moment.
Exactly. And I think, anyone who calls themselves spiritual, that suggests that there's some reflection going on about the spiritual life. So this is an invitation for people to do some reflection on their spiritual life without getting too heavy into church traditional practices. That hopefully will come. I'm not at all suggesting that, we don't need that at all, but I'm just trying to take people where they're at.
I love that first step, recalling that God is a creator. From that very first section of Genesis, a long time ago, when I was having, I would say, a little bit of a crisis in my own faith, something captured me in that beginning of Genesis. I just happened to be reading it, and it just dawned on me, my goodness, he creates, and then he gives. And we're created in that image. And so we should tap into that part of us that is the creator. And what I mean by that, by creating, that quote from Maya Angelou is so wonderful. You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. And so I think that is a first step. I thank you for bringing that forward.
Well, creativity is in our DNA. And because we're made in the image and likeness of God, who Scripture says the first thing that God did was to create. And, I always say that the Bible begins with an arts and crafts story. Basically, God crafts, the entire cosmos out of nothing. And then he creates us in his image. And so we are co-creators with God. We conspire with God. All the materials that we use are already created by God. We can't create something out of nothing. It's the illusion that a magician tries to pull the wool over our eyes and say, I can, pull a rabbit out of a hat. We can create, but using all of the things that God has already created, we can then become co-creators. And, a lot of people, I think, will think about themselves, say, well, I'm not that creative. Okay, I'm not talking here about being another Picasso. We don't have to, get a canvas out and start painting portraits. We don't have to become a professional photographer. We don't have to write songs. All of us create. One of the best examples, I was giving this presentation and I asked some of the people there to share what they create. And a woman said, I create Excel charts. I work in the business office and for the parish. And I create these charts all the time, and I love it because every chart I create tells a story. And I thought, that's what I'm talking about. That's creativity. It doesn't have to be overly artistic. And so everyone should stop and think about, what am I creating in my work or in my leisure, in my hobbies? But it doesn't stop there. We can also feed off of other people's creativity. This is why we go to the theater and to the opera and to symphonies and concerts, because being around other people's creativity feeds us and energizes us. So there's so many ways that we can get in touch with creativity, and in doing so, we're experiencing that divine energy of our own Creator.
We'll return to Inside the Pages in just a moment. This is Kris McGregor of Discerning Hearts, a nonprofit Catholic apostolate dedicated to evangelization and spiritual formation through the use of new media. Discerning Hearts creates engaging multimedia specializing in audio and video productions which are faithful to the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church and its rich, authentic spiritual tradition. Its mission responds to the Church's call to use the media for evangelization, catechesis, and spiritual renewal. We have made a commitment since the beginning to make the truth shared through Discerning Hearts totally free to users throughout the world. Besides our website, discerninghearts.com, Discerning Hearts has a newly updated free app where users can find all their favorite Discerning Hearts programming, including Father Timothy Gallagher, Dr. Anthony Lillis, Deacon James Keating, Mike Aquilina, Dr. Matthew Bunson, and so many more. There, too, you'll find numerous beautifully produced devotionals and novenas, including the Holy Rosary and Stations of the Cross, to help users create a sacred time for prayer wherever they may be. Discerning Hearts programming can be found on numerous streaming platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and so many more. Discerning Hearts also has an ever-growing YouTube channel. Discerning Hearts online spiritual retreats and seminars have helped souls in North and South America, Europe, Africa, Australia, the Middle East, and the Philippines. For many people all around the world, Discerning Hearts is a daily source of inspiration, spiritual nourishment, and encouragement. We can only do this thanks to the generous financial support of our friends and benefactors. Please consider donating to our mission today. The world is looking for answers, for spiritual guidance and authentic discernment, for relationship and community. Your support is very much needed and appreciated. Please keep our mission in your prayers and tell a friend about Discerning Hearts. We now return to Inside the Pages. We're talking with Joe Paprocki about his book, 8 Steps to Energize Your Faith. What I also appreciated in the book, 8 Steps to Energize Your Faith, is that after each section in a particular chapter, after you've gone through and kind of broken open that thought, you give a type of question or a challenge. The word, I think, is perfect, pondering, a kind of a lexio for that chapter, so you're not rushing past it and missing something.
Yeah, our motto for that is our Mother Mary, how often in Scripture says that she pondered all these things. And again, I think that is a big part of the spiritual life is pondering, that we ponder experiences, we ponder things we see. We can, look out the window and ponder a sunset or a couple of birds flying around. We can ponder an exchange we just had with someone in a conversation. This is what it means to be spiritual. St. Ignatius really taught us, he didn't use these words, these are mine, but he taught us that God is usually more visible in the rear view mirror of life. Mm-hmm. That as we look back and ponder, then we can recognize God's fingerprints, his footprints, whatever metaphor you want to use. And so that's why St. Ignatius taught a prayer like the daily examen. It's pondering. It's saying, go back over your day. Look at the everyday things that you did, changing diapers, washing dishes, going to work, taking the train, having a conversation, having lunch, anything, whatever it is. Look back, ponder over that day. Where do you see God's presence? Where did you become more aware of that presence? What are some things perhaps we did that took us away from recognizing that presence? What are we grateful for? Very simple exercise, but it all comes down to pondering, as Jesus' mother did.
I thought that there was a definition of authentic spirituality that was contained even in this section where you said authentic spirituality, our hunger for meaning beyond that which meets the eye, cultivates creativity. Authentic spirituality, a good aspect of it is that our hunger for meaning beyond that which meets the eye. That's the quest, isn't it?
It is. It is absolutely crucial for all of us to have a meaning and purpose in life. I think that's what each of us seeks every day. Why should I get out of bed today? And when despair overwhelms us, that's when we feel like we have no answer to that. There's no reason, no good reason for me to get out of bed. And that is despair. And so meaning and purpose are absolutely critical. You know, you think of going back to the old Baltimore Catechism that some of us remember being taught. It began with a question, why did God make me? What's my purpose in life? What's the meaning of life? St. Ignatius in his spiritual exercises begins with the principle and foundation. What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose? Why are we here? And so that's an authentic spirituality, deals with that question. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the purpose of my everyday activities? And what our tradition wants to offer people is that our purpose is to know God, to love Him, to serve Him. And what a wonderful thing it is to be in an intimate relationship with our Creator. So yeah, I really do believe that's at the heart of authentic spirituality, is that reflection on the meaning and purpose of our lives.
You'll go on to say that ourselves in touch with God because we must rely on what God has already created. You've said it before, but if you're a chef, if you're a florist, whatever you might do, you might be home, you might even be the homemaker that is creating that place for your family. God is helping you in that movement. And part of what this particular chapter, this first step in energizing your faith, is just that recognition and then entering into that great dance with a Creator who wants to be a part of that day, of that activity, that creation that you're working through with Him.
It's overwhelming to think that God is really interested in me while I'm washing dishes or doing something mundane. Or like you said, especially when we're creating something, that this is the good news that Jesus came to proclaim, that the kingdom of heaven, the place where God dwells, has drawn near. God has drawn near to us. So what does that mean in everyday life? If we're spending the majority of our time doing what seem like mundane, trivial things, and our tradition is saying that God is with us when these things are happening, then we can experience the Almighty in the most simple, mundane moment. Now, that takes a little doing. I'm not just saying that, boom, there it is. We have to continually work at developing that eyesight to be able to recognize and reminding ourselves, okay, this isn't just a waste of time, that this is, part of my meaning and purpose in life is to, maintain a household. And that means washing dishes and mopping floors and doing laundry. It's a way that I show love to my family or my spouse and so on. So it takes some pondering to do that. And I believe that's what a tradition does for us. I think a tradition, a religious tradition, compels us, I don't want to say forces us, compels us to ponder, because otherwise we can become mindless. We can just go through the actions. We need a tradition that says, okay, stop, reflect, ponder, and search for God.
Now, I want people to run out and get 8 steps to energize your faith, so that in each of these steps, don't think that what Joe is saying is the complete aspect of this, because you do guide souls that are reading this very carefully through these different steps. And I love the steps that we take in the second part of this, and that's a delighting in all of creation. And you are, you're the good son of Ignatius of Loyola, but here you tip the hat to St. Francis.
Yeah, so we always think of St. Francis when we think of nature and outdoors, and rightly so. It is no accident or coincidence that retreat houses all over the world are always placed in pastoral settings so that during the retreat, people can go outside. I think we all know that there is something deeply enriching about being outdoors, especially when the weather's nice. I live in Chicago. It's not always nice to be outside, but
but even in the snow, there still can be beautiful.
It is. I've had beautiful moments in the snow and just, watching the beauty of that. And, so God created all of this, and then he delights in it. Scripture tells us that beautiful story of Adam and Eve looking for God, and they heard him taking a walk in the garden during the breezy time of the day. What a beautiful image that God is just delighting in his creation. And so we as well can do the same thing and just recognize that sometimes we need to get out of the high-rise building we're working in. I'm on the 11th floor right now of a business building, but I'm looking out the window at just beautiful, beautiful scenery. There's a forest preserve across the street. So all I see is green. There's a couple of hotels, but then it's just all green and it's just gorgeous. And so during my lunch break, I'm going to step outside and take a 20-minute walk. Why? Because that reminds us of presence of God and the beauty of God, and it renews us. We feel renewed when we've spent some time outdoors in nature. And so, that was deserving of an entire chapter for sure.
I loved it. And even though in the next step, simplifying your life, essentially, that you may not have mentioned St. Benedict, but he's in there too. Do you really need it? You have to ask yourself, can you let go of it? What are you clinging to? And especially in our culture, that's a tough one.
It is. And I did mention St. Benedict, but not in that chapter. I talk about him in the chapter on relationships because his rule certainly taught us about relationships. But, certainly he taught us about simplicity as well. And we live in a society of hoarders. I mean, we are taught to gather things and to hoard them. And that can become even a serious syndrome that people fall into, being a hoarder.
Are you looking at my office right now, Joe? Is that what you're doing?
I wasn't pointing any fingers now, Kris.
Okay. All right. Okay.
When you look at Scripture, right to the very beginning of salvation history of God intervening in the lives of the Jewish people, whose lives did he intervene in? People who were enslaved, not rich, powerful people. He entered the lives of people who were really nobodies. It's what a person who's enslaved is. And so God always seems to have a preference for the simple folks, the folks who live a simple life. Jesus was born in a manger and a stable surrounded by animals. He was born simply. He lived simply. He spent his time with simple folks. So much so that people thought it was scandalous. The big shots were like, why isn't he spending time with me? I'm the big shot. Instead, he, preferred to spend time with the simple folks. So simplicity is something that's close to God's heart. And so I think when we can simplify our lives, both in terms of possessions and in terms of time, we're closer to God's heart, where we have more space within our own heart to find the true joy. Possessions don't bring us true joy. They bring fleeting happiness. And so it's important for us to clear out and recognize what really brings us, fulfills us, and that is the grace of God.
Again, I keep saying it. I love this book, 8 Steps to Energize Your Faith. It is, I was going to say your life, but I guess if you're energizing your faith, they walk hand in hand, don't they? I mean, no matter what you're going to go through.
They definitely do. And if they don't, then we need to ponder what's going on in our practices, religious practices, because it has to connect. Our faith is what gives us meaning and purpose, as you talked about before, Kris. So when I find myself, down in the dumps, just the other day, I was having a day that I just, was just everything wasn't going right, and I wasn't feeling great and kind of down in the dumps. And I was taking a walk outside, which, again, I kind of forced myself, get outside, do something. And I reminded myself, okay, what are you thankful for? A little gratitude. And so I just started doing a little list in my head of what I'm thankful for, just to sort of reboot the system and get in touch with, what I'm truly grateful for and where I'm going to be able to find energy. Because let's face it, we're not always feeling it, so to speak. We can spiritually, drag through the day. And so, what can we do to energize? And this is precisely why I wrote the book. I wanted to share with people that God has revealed to us numerous ways that we can and should energize our lives by tapping into his divine life, which he shares with us in so many ways.
We'll continue our conversation in our next episode. With Joe Paprocki, we've gone inside the pages of 8 Steps to Energize Your Faith. To learn more about this book or to obtain a copy, go to loyolapress.com, the website for its publisher, Loyola Press, or you can find it at any fine Catholic bookstore. To hear and or to download this conversation, along with hundreds of other spiritual formation programs, visit discerninghearts.com, or you can find it within the Discerning Hearts free app or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. This has been a production of Discerning Hearts. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. We hope that if this has been helpful for you, that you will first pray for our mission, which is to offer authentic and rock-solid spiritual formation freely for souls around the world. And if you feel us worthy, please consider a charitable donation, which is fully tax-deductible, to help support our efforts. But most of all, we hope that you will tell a friend about discerninghearts.com and join us next time for Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors.